Hi, my name is Autumn Dickson, and this week is July 29th through August 4th, the Come Follow Me program associated with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And this week we are studying Alma 36 through 38. Now, I want to talk about Helaman today, but before I dive into that, I want to share a little bit of a personal experience. So there's a period of time in my life where my stress levels grew to unhealthy levels. I was experiencing some postpartum depression, and I had a multitude of responsibilities, none of which I felt like I could give up. So I was waking up at the crack of dawn with a toddler after being up all night with a baby, and I felt like I would wake up really early and I would move from task to task, interrupted in a task to help a child, task. And all of a sudden I would look up and it was 10 p.m. at night and I still had stuff that I was supposed to be getting done. And on top of all of these responsibilities that I was feeling, I also had some health problems going on. And so I just felt like there wasn't a lot of space for reprieve. I didn't feel like I could lift my head above water and take a breath. My husband Connor at the time, his work was absolutely chaotic. And so he was also just trying to survive. And that's kind of just the mode that we were in. We were in survival mode, going from task to task, and basically feeling all the stress in the world. Now, my lovely mother kept encouraging me to simplify my life. And this was absolutely wonderful advice. I highly recommend that advice. And I really, really tried to follow this advice. However, I didn't feel like there was anything at that time in my life that I could really give up. I feel like I listed everything that was really taking up my time, and there wasn't anything that I could give away. So I was trying to keep my house relatively sanitary, even if it wasn't always tidy. Because of the health problems I was experiencing, I was having to change my diet and cook a lot more things from scratch, which takes a lot more time. I couldn't get rid of my kids and all the tasks that they involved. And so really the only thing that was left over that was taking up a lot of time was my blog, my podcast, my YouTube channel. And it was taking up a significant amount of time. And I couldn't get rid of these other things. And so I was turning to the Lord somewhat regularly, asking if I could stop doing this. And he kept telling me no. And I asked so many times that had a little bit of a Joseph Smith experience where the Lord told me to stop asking or I was going to cross over into disobeying, which is not what I wanted to do. So I decided that I was going to keep doing it because I felt like he was telling me I needed to do it. But I was also holding a lot of frustration and resentment because I felt like he didn't care that I was sacrificing myself, that I was like totally killing myself to do everything I needed to do as a mother, as a wife, and as a housekeeper, on top of trying to do everything that I needed to do for this extra work that he had given me. And I felt resentful of that. I felt like it was killing me. And there were a couple of times when I would feel this little whisper that it didn't have to kill me, that I didn't have to carry it all by myself. And for reasons I'm not totally sure of, I didn't listen. I suppose that I didn't trust the Lord enough yet to allow him to take over. I didn't trust him sufficiently that I handed the weight of that responsibility over to him. I was afraid that if I didn't kill myself to do it, that there would be no one there to pick up the slack and then everything would just fall apart. Now, it would have been really easy for the Lord to just remove some of the stress that I was experiencing. It would have been easy for him to minimize the tasks or to minimize interruptions when I was trying to work on some of the tasks. It would have been easy for him to send resources my way so that I could delegate some of those tasks. In fact, some people might even have argued that it was cruel for him to just let me struggle when I was trying to do what he wanted me to do. I know that I thought that subconsciously. And as I look back, I recognize that the Lord is not there to make my life easier. I recognize that the Lord was wise enough to let me carry it until I broke. That he knew that the only way to soften my heart and to change, to have a happier life, was to let me learn the hard way, to suffer in my bullheadedness and he waited. He waited until I was ready to turn to him. I know that comparatively, I am extremely blessed. I have been given so much, but I share this story because I know that I'm not the only one who has experienced those feelings of being run ragged, of feeling like you've been given all of these tasks, not only just to survive in the world, but also church responsibilities. I know I'm not the only one who has consciously or subconsciously been afraid that if I didn't martyr myself, everything was just going to fall apart and everything was going to fail. And I know that each of us is given periods of time in our life where we have to learn the specific lesson to trust him to help us accomplish what needs to be accomplished. Now, it is in these chapters that we find that Helaman is given a responsibility from his father. And this responsibility is to take on the plates and to record the history of the people, to record the spiritual things of the Lord on these plates. And I want you to think about for just a minute everything that Helaman was likely already doing. All the things that he had to do to survive and how to help his family survive in a world with no electricity, first of all the tasks that had to be accomplished in order to just survive. Not to mention the church responsibilities he probably was already holding. And Helaman was given this responsibility along with an admonishment of gravity. Like, you have to be careful with this, and if you can be steadfast and treat this responsibility with the gravity that it requires, that's what's being asked of you. There's a verse that I want to read. So this is Alma, it's chapter 37, and it is verse 20. So this is Alma, and he is talking to his son Helaman about this. It says, "Therefore I command you, my son Helaman, that you be diligent in fulfilling all my words, and that you be diligent in keeping the commandments of God as they are written. I have learned the hard way, more than once, that diligence is a hugely underrated principle, is a hugely underrated Christ-like attribute. When you think of Christ and his attributes, his characteristics, diligence is not often at the top of that list. That's just not one that we often think of. And yet, in Preach My Gospel, diligence is listed as one of the Christ-like attributes. And of all the attributes that they could have included in Preach My Gospel, they included diligence. And Preach My Gospel describes diligence as a steady, consistent, earnest, and energetic effort in doing the Lord's work. I have learned that the Lord does not ask for an all-consuming effort that completely takes over your life, at least not usually. For 99% of the time, he asks for diligence. And I have learned that diligence is this steady, consistent effort. I have also learned that at its core, it is an act of faith. It's an act of faith where you show up with willingness and you allow him to bring the miracle. Now, in that period of life that I described earlier, there came a point where I finally hit that breaking point and I didn't have anything left to give. And that was when I finally turned to the Lord. And I told him, I'll do what you're asking me to do because you keep telling me I'm supposed to be doing it. So I'll do what you want me to do. But I've given everything. And if it's not good enough, if it's not enough, I don't know what else to do because it's all that I have. And in that time following this breaking point, the Lord taught me that I was not giving him everything, that I was withholding my trust from him, trust that he could enable me to do what needed to happen. I have learned that if I want to accurately apply this principle of diligence in my life, it requires faith. It requires faith that he is going to quicken my abilities, that he's going to magnify my efforts, and that he's going to bring the miracle. He does that part. There's a phrase in these chapters that we read this week where it talks about how you should counsel with the Lord in all thy doings. And I found that in that particular period of my life, that's what I was doing. Because I was moving from task to task to task to task, I was turning to the Lord at any given moment about what he wanted me to be doing in that moment. So I would wake up and I would look at my to-do list. I would give a little smirk because there's no way I was going to get it done. And then throughout the day, I would let the Lord tell me what I should be doing at any given moment. And at that particular point in my life, my personal experience, because the Lord's going to work with all of us differently as he's trying to teach us this idea of diligence. At that particular point in my life, I had the training wheels on almost, or it felt like I had training wheels on because I felt guided in each section of my day. I would finish something and then I would feel guided about what I needed to do next, whether it was laundry or working on my blog or letting go of those responsibilities and making sure I was devoting enough time to my kids and the attention that they needed. I also found that I felt very deliberate pushes to rest, to nap, or even to read, that I felt prompted to do those things and to take that rest, that the Lord was giving me more breaks than I was going to give myself. And the biggest miracle that I found was that it got done anyway. I found that when the Lord would guide me to work on my blog, the kids would miraculously play so nicely and I wouldn't have to be a constant referee. I found that somehow dinner still got on the table and my kids got the occasional bath. And I had the same tasks that I had to do. And sometimes they still lasted into the night like they were lasting before. But the weight was gone. The stress was gone. I wasn't carrying all of that pressure anymore. When I hit my breaking point, I turned that weight over to the Lord. And so I still had all these tasks, but they didn't hurt anymore. I didn't carry it. I let the Lord carry it. And I had faith in him that he would be able to do it. The pressure was on him. It was no longer on me. Now I talk about how that was a personal experience at that time in my life because the Lord is going to teach us about diligence in different ways. I learned that diligence has evolved throughout my life. I had those training wheels on, but it has evolved at different times. I have needed different aspects of diligence at different times in my life. At that point in my life, I needed him to guide every section because there was so much that needed to get done. I needed to know where I was going to be most efficient in order to get it done. I have learned that sometimes diligence means closing my laptop and setting it aside and not beating my head against the wall because the Lord would give me the message I needed to share when he was good and ready to give me that message. And there was no need to try and force it. Right now in my life, diligence looks like a goal and a prayer. So when I found out I was pregnant, I found out that I was going to be needing to prepare extra videos so that I can have a break after the baby comes. So I made a goal with Heavenly Father, and I told him how much time I was going to be spending on this. And then I prayed that it would be sufficient. And under normal circumstances, I'm not sure that it would have been sufficient, that the time that I've been devoting to this would be sufficient. And there have been moments where I've been scared that I'm not investing enough time in order to be prepared for this baby to come. But I have to take a step back and I have to remember this Christ-like attribute of diligence and how much it's blessed my life in the past and how much he has brought miracles in the past, how I've been able to hit deadlines, and also to remember that I don't have to carry the weight of all of it, that diligence is an act of faith, that I can show up with a willingness and trust him to help me do what needs to be done. Another way that I've seen diligence manifest recently, I got a calling to teach the youth in my ward. And the bishop who came and talked to me about this calling, and he bore his testimony about how he found that he was spending more time than he had ever spent in the scriptures in order to prepare to teach these people that he was growing to love. He's a new bishop. And he's just talking about how he would just start reading the scriptures and he would just spend more and more time because he just wanted to invest this time and he loved these people so much. And I felt so happy for him. I was also so grateful that I had the Spirit whispering to me and that I did not feel the pressure to bring on more time because I was learning a different lesson than what he was learning at that time. That's the lesson that he was needing, and it was beautiful and wonderful. But the lesson that I was learning was that the Lord would work with the time that I had, that maybe I'm not spending 20 hours a week trying to prepare a lesson for these kids, but all of this effort that I'm putting forth towards being worthy of the Spirit, of spending any time in the scriptures preparing a message about Jesus Christ, all of these things are going to be considered preparation for these kids for these lessons. And I can trust the Lord to still show up for me, to still show up and bring the Spirit and help me help these kids and still do everything else I have to do as well. Diligence is going to evolve at different times in our lives. Sometimes it looks like we need to stop being idle. Other times it is a remembrance to accomplish the tasks and to take on the tasks without putting the weight on yourself. It's not just about letting go of the pressure and the weight. I have found that when I hand those things over to the Lord, the tasks aren't crushing me anymore, but even more than that, they become fulfilling. They become wonderful faith-promoting activities rather than activities where I feel like the Lord's allowing me to drown. The task that was given to Helaman couldn't have been easy. We know that carving on these plates was necessary in order for it to stand the test of time, but we know it wasn't easy. That's the way that it had to be. That's what the Lord commanded, but it wasn't an easy task. And Helaman had a lot to do, but while his father was admonishing him to take on this task, he also gave this promise. It is Alma chapter 37 and it's verse 16. It says, "But if you keep the commandments of God and do with these things which are sacred according to that which the Lord doth command you, for you must appeal unto the Lord for all things whatsoever you must do with them. Behold, no power of earth or hell can take them from you, for God is powerful to the fulfilling of all his words." There's a lot of keys in this verse. The first key is to do what the Lord commands. Because sometimes we are taking on what society commands, what culture demands. We're taking on all these extra responsibilities that aren't necessary to fulfilling what the Lord expects us to do. And so we need to first verify that we're doing the things that God expects of us. Another key is that if we are turning to the Lord and we're doing everything we can, we're giving all of that effort and we're showing up with a willingness to do what he's asking, no power of earth or hell can stand against you. You will be able to complete everything that you need to complete. Whether it is finding the brass plates or being able to carve out time in your schedule, the Lord will provide a way for you to accomplish the things which he commands. You show up, and you show up with a willingness and an open heart and faith. You give the pressure over to him because he's going to be the one accomplishing it anyway. And I promise that these small things, these small little changes in your heart where you just are willing to show that faith, are going to provide marvelous works in your life. I testify of a Lord who can help us move mountains, who can help us carve out time in our schedule. I testify of a Lord who can help us know how much time is sufficient. I testify that he can help us accomplish miracles and not to the detriment of our health or our family. And I testify that when we trust him, it brings a lot of miracles, not in being able to accomplish everything, but also a miracle within our own lives where the things that we've been asked to do become faith-promoting and fulfilling rather than crushing. I testify of this principle of diligence that Christ exemplified, that it is a blessing in our lives, and I say that in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.